Hello and welcome to another episode of Parker's Previews powered by The Hammer. This is a show where I'm going to take some data, some advanced stats, some analytics, break down, dive deeper into some college football matchups to help us be better consumers of football content and also smarter investors as we approach those matchups, looking to make some bets. This is video 3 of 3 for this week. I had a couple good plays that I was really excited about earlier in the week. A big-time ACC matchup this weekend. I think it went Big 12, Big 10. Going to go with an ACC matchup today. Clemson heads to Florida State. Before I get to that, make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. Make sure you like the video. Follow Parker's Previews on Twitter. Me at StatsAwar on Twitter. If you want to get this in audio format, want to hear me talk about the games instead of watch me talk about the games, as it were, you can get this anywhere podcasts are sold, presented. I don't know. This isn't sold. This is a free show. But make sure you're following all of that, and we will dive into Clemson and Florida State. This line is 3.5 or 4, depending on where you want. I certainly like that 3.5 number. And I don't mind a 4, especially if you're paying for the 3.5. But it looks like if you're smart, you can get 3.5 at pretty good money, and don't need to pay. Don't need to pay for that extra half point relative to where you can get 4. So that's going to be the pick for me this week is Clemson plus 3.5. That's 83% of the bets are on Clemson, only 58% of the money. So a couple people are in big on Florida State, but overall, I think that Clemson's a more solid team, and there's a couple underlying factors here that really make this a good spot. Clemson's 6-0 straight up on the season, 4-2 against the spread, 3-3 on the over. They're averaging 39.3 points per game, 18.3 points allowed. Florida is 4-2 straight up. They're 5-1 against the spread, 2-4 over and under. The line for this game for the over under is 51. Just based on my numbers, would be inclined to take a little bit of an over here, but my official play is going to be Clemson and the side. Clemson's 7-3 in their last 10 last 10 games against Florida State. Money line, and 4-1 in the spread in their last 5 games against Florida State. So definitely a one-sided affair here, kind of historically. And a pretty big game, a pretty big spot for both of these teams. One to determine kind of the outcome of the ACC, but also nationally, Clemson's got a lot of respect. They're ranked as high as 4th now. Are they going to be a playoff team, or are they just, still kind of that fatally flawed team from last year? I think we're seeing some turning the corner and some really positive regression from Clemson and some development. So let's dive in. Let's talk about this matchup. So I have this game, Clemson about 70% to win compared to Florida State about 30% to win. 35 projected points for Clemson, 28 projected points for Florida State. So I expect this to be scoring, to be pointsy. Again, both of those I think are close to their season averages as I'm pulling that up. Yeah, Clemson 39 on average, Florida State 31 on average. So, a little bit lower than average for both teams, but I am a little more conservative and don't model in those special teams and defensive scores that both teams have benefited from. In terms of adjusted EPA per play, Clemson is 12th. Florida State is 17th in EPA per play margin, which again is just slightly weighted towards offense to kind of reflect on-field realities. Clemson a lot more balanced compared to Florida State's kind of one-sidedness. So Clemson is 38th in EPA per play offense. They're 15th in expected points added per play on defense, whereas Florida State 16th on offense. Very fun, very dynamic, but they're 56th on defense. You don't talk about opponent adjustments there and kind of who is, who's played who. Neither team, for like both teams, neither team in my estimation have a huge edge in kind of strength of schedule here. Both have played Wake Forest, both have played NC State. Florida does get that non-con game against LSU or Florida State gets that non-con game against LSU to start the season. And Clemson had Georgia Tech, so a little bit of a discrepancy there, but this only means what it means. The transitive property doesn't necessarily hold in college football, but I will say that it's worth noting. Clemson beat Wake Forest 51-45. Florida State lost to Clemson by 10, And Clemson beat NC State by 10. Florida State lost to NC State by 2. So 2 recent matchups. They've both played them in the last 4 weeks, and have some different results there. So I like that Clemson is successful in the run game on offense. They're 50th overall in success rate, 77th in the pass game, 34th in the rush game. That is a step up from last year. Last year, DJU, the quarterback, had like negative 34 total expected points added. Just had some absolute boneheaded plays, and it looks like here they're just being a little bit inefficient. They're not getting those huge negative plays overall. DJU, 63.9% completion, 7.7 yards per attempt, 14 touchdowns to 2 interceptions. Last season, he was 9-9 on touchdowns and interceptions, just for reference, completing only 54% of his passes. So through the first 6 games has looked like he's a lot more comfortable, looks a lot more reliable overall. Looking at turnover worthy plays, last season he had 11 turnover worthy plays all season. He only has 3 through the first 6 games this season, so minimizing some of that. Also, his average depth of target is up. He's connecting downfield a little bit more often, and his big time throw percentage is 9.4 compared to 4.9 last year. So big step up from DJU this year. I think a lot of that has to do with Clemson's rushing ability. Will Shipley being healthy is just huge for them. When he's on, they're great. And Shipley has hit 100 twice this season. He's at 64 times this season, and they haven't really needed him in a couple games. Boston College only 33 yards, Georgia Tech 42. They just haven't needed him. Had a great game against Wake with 104 yards overall there as well. So when Shipley's healthy, I think this just kind of raises the floor of this offense to a level that it really was going way below last season. Florida State, so Clemson, again, balanced on offense, 39th EPA per pass, 44th EPA per rush. Florida State, pretty balanced on defense, pretty poor overall. 59th is right in the middle of the FBS on EPA per pass, passing efficiency, 63rd in EPA per rush. They're pretty good at preventing scoring opportunities. Florida State is 35th in in quality possession rate, whereas Clemson is 54th. But Clemson is great at finishing drives. They're 5th in that points per quality possession, whereas Florida State is 11th. So Florida State is not really giving up kind of the big explosive touchdown. And when you get across the 40, they are kind of frustrating you. They've had a couple drives that they've stopped inside the 40, but Clemson is getting those big touchdowns and they're scoring pretty decently. Worrisome for me is when we look at the splits of early and late downs for Clemson and Florida State here. Clemson is 73rd in early downs EPA, but they're 21st in 3rd and 4th down success. Normally, that's an indicator to me that their offense is unsustainable, but Florida State 82nd in 3rd and 4th down success. So even if Clemson does get in these, the 3rd down situations they're going to find themselves in are going to be very favorable against this Florida State offense. Of note, Florida State's offense is also 95th in EPA per play. So very poor on early downs. Clemson should be able to stay ahead of the chains, stay out of those negative situations where they compound a failed play with a DJU mistake, and should be able to score pretty heartily against a defense that hasn't looked great against some not excellent offenses this season. So let's get rid of these and talk about the other side of the ball. It's a lot more fun, best on best kind of, whereas I think Clemson's offense is what's going to win them the game and help them cover. Clemson's defense versus Florida State's offense is definitely the more interesting matchup. 2 very, very split teams, right? Florida State, 15th in EPA per pass. A lot of that involves Jordan Travis and his legs. Quarterback Jordan Travis is completing 62.6% of his passes. But if we look at his rushes, he has, 4 scrambles, 40 yards, 152 designed yards on the ground. So some of his legs have really helped them on 3rd downs and to extend 3rd downs as well. Average depth of target is 12.0. He's got 11 big time throws to 2 turnover worthy plays. He's only taken 6 sacks on 59 pressures. So just about a 10% pressure to sack rate. Very elusive. Will definitely be formidable against the Clemson front there. But I think that because they haven't been able to rush very well relatively, they're 40th in EPA per rush, that does limit what they're going to be able to do, especially against this Clemson offense, who is holding opponents to negative 3.10 EPA per rush. So a third of a point for Clemson's opponents when they rush against them. Florida State, really good at finishing or getting quality possessions. They're 13th in quality possession rate. That's 68th in the nation, whereas they finish them very poorly, 117th in the nation, averaging less than a field goal for points per quality possession. That's going to be a lot of trouble because Clemson is top 40 in both quality possession rate allowed and points per quality possession. Additionally, Clemson has been excellent at starting field position, holding opponents to their 27.1. Florida State is 65th. So that's already a problem with Florida State. So as I'm looking at this matchup, I'm thinking Florida State their weaker unit is rushing. They're going to need to rush against Clemson to be able to keep the ball moving. Clemson's rush defense really good. I don't think that's going to happen. Florida State can generate quality possessions with big plays, but when the field gets short, they really struggle finishing them. They haven't played a defense as good as Clemson's here. And so I see a story of Florida State getting some opportunities, maybe few opportunities than they have all season, but still not being able to finish those opportunities. So that does not bode well for the offense. In terms of early and late down splits, Clemson is very, very balanced, 21st overall, 10th in third and fourth down success. Florida State is 8th on early downs EPA, but they're 50th in third and fourth down. So that really comes down. They really find themselves in a lot of negative third down situations overall. So that is kind of the matchup there that I think is the team level kind of what's important. I do want to say in terms of Florida State, who's getting the ball, I'm interested to see what they do with the receivers. They have 3 guys with 25 targets: Johnny Wilson, Micah Pittman, Ontario Wilson. The old Wilson to Wilson connection there. Can they involve Cameron McDonald, the tight end, enough to kind of spread out this Clemson defense credibly? I'm not entirely sure that they can, even if they have been able to connect to those guys before. Again, I think in terms of strength of opponent, this is the best defense Florida State has played, and close to the best offense. I think you'll say that Wake Forest is equally. So we'll say one of the best offenses they've played, whereas Florida State is one of the best offenses that Clemson's played, but their defense is not close to the best defense that they've played. So a lot of signs here point to Clemson winning. I have them by about a touchdown. And, their season point totals have them about a touchdown. So I think Clemson's a really great play here. If you can get it at 3.5, all the better. Don't pay to get that 3.5 though. Take 4 if you've got it, at 110 or 107 or whatever. Don't pay any points to get that extra, half a point there. I think you won't end up needing it. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. You're on Twitter at Parker's Previews. Follow the YouTube channel. Follow me at Stats of War on Twitter. I'll be chatting about games, tweeting about games all weekend. And I hope your bets all cash. Best of luck this weekend. And we'll see you back here next week on Parker's Previews, powered by The Hammer.